Hello everyone, hope you're all well. So Miss Huntley and I decided to do something a little different for Lit Soc this week. With the library being closed, we decided that we would take the library to you. And we've been out and about finding out what you've all been reading and what you plan to read next over half term. So if you need some literary inspiration, hopefully this video will give you what you're looking for. Enjoy!
Over the summer I read A Tale of Magic and I read A Fault in Our Stars by John Green. I liked them because they were very interesting and they were really gripping as well. Over the half term I think I will read Watership Down.
One of the favourite books that I read over the summer was this one, The Martian by Andy Weir. Now you've probably seen the film, which I also very much enjoyed, but I actually like the book better because it's really informative, and you know it's going to have a happy ending, so it's kind of a nice sort of happy, relaxing read. I've also recently just finished this book, which I was really excited to read because I love Richard Osman, on Pointless and the House of Games TV shows that he does. But actually I didn't really enjoy it that much because I just found I didn't fully really engage with the characters. A good book should be one that you, it's almost you get drawn back because you want to know, you want to hear those people's voices again. And this one, somehow it just didn't. And also the people that get murdered, I don't know, you don't really end up caring about them too much. I'm in the middle of reading this one as well, which possibly I don't imagine any of the pupils at Surbiton High will want to read. This is quite an important book for a teacher of my age, because when I was training as a teacher, we were taught sort of 20 years ago that students had to learn everything by discovering it for themselves. And I always thought that seemed a bit sort of, didn't really make sense to me. And now it's swinging around the other way and saying it is actually a good thing to actually teach the students the information. And this is a collection of essays by people that I very much respect about how, the best way to do that and how that, why that is a good way to teach. So over half term, I'm looking forward to reading this book, which is quite an old one, but I hadn't heard of it. I really like Tracy Chevalier, and I love The Lady and the Unicorn, and I've read quite a few of her books. And this one I hadn't heard of. So I haven't booked it out of the library yet, but I will be doing it because I would never take it home without booking it out, Mr. Humphreys. And also this one is brand new, it's still in hardback, so it would cost me a lot of money if I was to buy it. And I'm pleased to see it in the library because I really like Matt Haig. I know he's written a non-fiction book. He tweets a lot about mental health, which I think is always, I really enjoy sort of coming across his tweets on my feed. But also he wrote a book called, I think it was called Humans, about a man who sort of woke up one day and he kind of didn't quite know who he was. And it was a sort of quite an entertaining but very warm story about sort of a mental health situation. And then he also wrote one called How to Stop Time, which I also very, very much enjoyed. So I'm looking forward to this one. So these are going to be my two half-term reads, an old one and a new one.
I recommend the book Pig Heart Boy because it shows that sometimes you've got to make really hard decisions in life, and that sometimes it'll come out for the best and sometimes it won't come out the best, but you've got to follow what your heart says. And it also shows a lot of resilience and perseverance with this life.
Okay, thanks for asking. Well, over the summer I listened to Sweet Sorrow by David Nichols. Just to name drop, it is read by a close friend of mine, Rory Kinnear, finest actor of his generation. You didn't like that, Mr. Humphreys. But I really enjoyed listening to it. It's funny, it's sweet, it's about Romeo and Juliet, so what's not to like? So I think people in, students of all ages, but certainly year 10 and 11, I think you get something a little bit more out of it, given that you may have studied Romeo and Juliet. I'd recommend that, and the characters are all sort of school leaver age, so I think you'd take a lot out of it. And then over half term I plan to plough on with Gormenghast, which is a really huge trilogy, very gothic, and my Kindle says I'm 17% through it, and it feels like I've been going for ages, but I am enjoying it. and it was recommended to me by Miss Humphreys from the library, so I will stick with that. I'm enjoying it. Good luck, take care.
Over the summer, I read Jane Eyre and Animal Farm. I like these books because they were about topics that I really enjoy learning about. And in half term, I think I will finish reading Sherlock Holmes because I love detectives. And I'll probably start reading a book called Sophie's World, and it's about philosophy. And I quite enjoy philosophy, so that's what I want to read.
So I have just finished the Inspector Rebus novel, which was called Black and Blue. I think it was the 6th or 7th in the series. I'd started reading the series many years ago, and I just decided to have another go at it. I quite like him as a character. He's, I guess, a bit of an anti-hero. He's a policeman that has very high morals, wants to make sure that he's putting the bad people away, but he does go about it in quite a clumsy way sometimes, I think, which he knows. And he's got quite a chaotic personal life that the author Ian Rankin kind of weaves into the story. I think also what I really like about the novels, they're quite involved. They take a long time, and they sort of all the threads come together almost in the last few pages, which makes you have to concentrate and work at it quite a bit. But I think the thing I really like as well, the novels are mainly set in Edinburgh and other cities, but mainly Edinburgh. And so I've been to Edinburgh a few times, and I guess I've only ever seen the chocolate box tourist version, but what he sort of paints is the seedy underbelly that we don't see. I guess maybe that most of us don't see in any city. And I quite like that. And he actually deals with some very hard-hitting topics within the stories. But ultimately, you know he's going to get the bad person at the end of the day, which I guess we quite like. I quite like. It's quite easy reading from that point of view. I haven't watched any of the TV adaptations. I quite like to watch some of the TV adaptations, see what they're like. The other thing as well, it's quite an old series. So the book that I've just finished, Black and Blue, was actually written in 1996. So, for example, reading it back, there's no mobile phones. You know, he's having to go into payphone to speak to people. Or even fax people and things like that. So it's quite interesting to look back at. It's almost historical in some ways, even though it's fairly recent history. So yeah, that's the Rebus. So I'm sort of slowly getting back into the series. I think there are some newer ones, but there's about another 8 or 9 that I haven't read.
Over the summer I read The Fault in Our Stars, and I definitely recommend it because I really enjoyed it, and it was quite entertaining, and I really liked it. And I read quite a lot of books over the summer, and I plan on reading quite a lot in the half term as well.
Over the summer I read lots of the Shakespeare short stories, so I read Much Ado About Nothing, Romeo and Juliet, As You Like It. I really enjoy those books because I really like Shakespeare, so I enjoy his plays as well. Over the half term, I'm probably going to finish off my Daniel Steele book. It's called A Blessing in Disguise.
So, over the break, I read a series of books by Andy McDermott, who's an Australian author, where they discover Atlantis, Excalibur, things to do with Hercules, and all sorts of like mythical weapons and archaeology sort of things. And she's an archaeologist and he's an ex-SAS operator, so there's sort of like the intrigue of Indiana Jones, but also with the gung-ho shooting and violence of that sort of book. They're all pretty much the same. I do encourage reading them, but they're all the same.
I would really recommend Death Set Sail because of all the twists and turns, and it shows that even in dark times you can have positivity in the world.
I recently read Time Travelling with a Hamster, and I would quite recommend it because it's a really fun read with some interesting little facts sprinkled in, as well as some really nice points made by the author.
Over the summer, I read Anne of Green Gables and Carrie's War. I personally liked Carrie's War more, as it was about the war, and she lived in rations, and she went to live with two relatives that she had never ever met before, and she grew to know them, but I think one of them died, and it was all about getting his inheritance. And then Anne of Green Gables was about this orphan that moved to the countryside, and the actual people wanted a boy, and she was a girl, so they grew to love her, and she helped about on the farm, and she was learning about school. During half term, I really want to read Hamlet, and I want to learn a lot more about Shakespeare, as we've been learning about Much Ado About Nothing, and I personally think that his play is really good, and it's really funny.
So I read a few books during lockdown. One book that I read that I didn't think I would enjoy as much as I did was by Arthur Conan Doyle. It's called The Sign of the Four. So it's a classic detective novel that looks at at Sherlock Holmes and investigates a drama and a mystery. It was interesting because there are elements of it that are quite creepy. Holmes himself is not a very likeable character, but it was interesting to watch him in action. So that was a bit of Victorian fiction that I enjoyed. I also read a book by Pat Barker that you might know better for her Regeneration trilogy that looks at the lives of some of the World War I poets. She's written a book as well called The Silence of the Girls, which takes the story of the fall of Troy and looks particularly at the life of Achilles, Patroclus, the slave girl called Briseis, I think, or Briseis, and retells that story through the eyes of the women who were once of high status in Troy, and then at the fall and capture of Troy became slaves, essentially. So that was interesting. I also read a sort of linguistics book by a theorist called Deborah Cameron called The Myth of Mars and Venus. Now, if you're interested in feminism or you're interested in language or gender stereotypes, it's a really interesting book that tackles the myth that men and women use language in essentially different ways because of their essential differences. And what it does is examines the evidence, breaks it down, and demonstrates that is really just a myth. And what it only serves to do is reinforce this idea that men and women are essentially different and that there's a problem there because of our differences. So that was good. Coming up in half term, I'm going to read a classic that I've not read, D.H. Lawrence, Lady Chatterley's Lover. And I might find time for another book also based on the myth of the fall of Troy, a book by Haynes called 1,000 Ships. So I'll let you know how I get on.
Recently I've been reading the book Dracula. It's really good. I would recommend it because, it's a classic. It's quite sophisticated, but if you understand it and follow along the story, it's definitely worth it. And recently I've been reading Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. I highly recommend it because it's got a really good spin on an old culture.
Hi Lit Soc. So as you can see, I read quite a substantial amount over the summer, which was rare for me, but I did it. So I will be showing you all of the books I read, then talking off the top of my head about the ones that I found the most interesting. So I read first Kathleen Windsor's Forever Amber. Have not finished reading it. As you can see, it's quite a substantial book, but I am enjoying it, and it relates to my GCSE history course, which thankfully has not been cut out. And it's a romance, which is not usually my style, but I am quite enjoying it. Then I read The Girl in the Broken Mirror by Savita Cowhan. I also read Cut Me Free by J.R. Johansson. And Boy Queen by George Lester. And then a bit of a throwback, A Bus Called Heaven by Bob Graham. I also read Black Flamingo by Dean Atter and Mythos by Stephen Fry, but I gave them back to the library. So of all of these, I think my favourite was The Girl in the Broken Mirror by Savita Cowhan. It's a YA book. It's quite a sensitive topic about sexual assault, but of a girl my age. So it being a girl my age, I found it relatable. It's really well written. It is quite a devourable, I don't know if that's a word, book. even it's a very tough subject matter, so it's a bit much in one go, but I read it on holiday, which was a strange choice. But I really enjoyed it. It really resonated with me, and I want to read more of Savita's work because I think she's brilliant. The other highlight, all of these were highlights. I'm finding it hard to choose. Cut Me Free. I wasn't sure if I'd like this book, but I really enjoyed it. I could not stop reading it. As soon as I started, I read it at the beach. I read it at a restaurant, which I was told off for. I read it under the covers at night. It's a thriller, and it's the first YA thriller that I've read about a girl who's had to change her identity, and she meets this boy who helps her do that, and on the way she's trying to avoid the people that she's running from, and also falls in love with the boy. So all in all, a really good read, something I hadn't heard of before, but once I had heard of it, I wanted to read it, and I did enjoy it. I also decided to read some picture books just for a bit of comfort over lockdown. And I remembered that we had A Bus Called Heaven by Bob Graham, and I've always remembered this book for its amazing illustration and message and diversity. So yeah, I really enjoyed reading this. It's a story about a neighbourhood that is mostly divided, and they find a bus just lying in the middle of the road one day, and they decide to fix it up and make it into a community space. So for someone like me who's very family driven, if that makes sense, I found it really inspiring, honestly, and quite comforting. And it really is a heavenly bus, as the title suggests. Boy Queen by George Lester was quite an interesting read, actually, by an English author who did basically a master's degree in drag. And the reason I found it interesting was because I've never read a book that was quite so ingrained in the now, in the 21st century, in the 2020. So it mentions Instagram and my mind has gone blank. Instagram, texting, drag queens that are from the now. I just think it will interest me what I think about it in 20 years from now, because it's so ingrained now in the now. So I'm wondering whether I'll find it a nice time capsule or something that I'm completely unrelated to and I don't feel a connection to it anymore. I read this on the way back from Cheltenham on the bus, and it was a very easy read, but again, like Savita's book, with I think a good message. So always like a book with a good message. Dean Atter's book was also, I think, related to this. In Boy Queen, Robin is my age, about 17, but in Dean Atter's book, the main character is about 20. So I thought the difference between a 17-year-old drag queen and a 20-year-old drag queen was particularly interesting. So that's what I read over the summer. I hope you're all staying happy and healthy, and I'll see you when Litsoc rejoins together. Bye.